Are you finding that the harder you work, the more invisible you become? Maybe you're sitting in meetings where your judgment, the judgment that only comes from working in your field for 20, maybe 30 years, just doesn't seem to be as needed as it used to be. Maybe there's a voice in your head that's piping up saying something like, maybe I've just got too much experience. Maybe it's downhill all the way from now on. I want to tell that voice to zip it right now because it's wrong. But the system that inspired that voice and what it's trying to make you believe, it's called Gen X or midlife burnout. And it's a special kind of burnout because it's not just about being worn out and worn down. It's about being undervalued at exactly the moment in your career where your experience, your decades of experience, should be seen as your greatest asset. I've watched this happen to brilliant people over many years, and to be honest, I've felt it myself. So in today's video, I thought I'd talk about what's actually going on and, of course, what you can do about it. Here's what we're going to cover. First, what Gen X or midlife burnout actually is and why it affects people with decades of experience so differently. Second, the specific workplace dynamics that can make you feel so invisible when you're doing everything right. Third, I'm going to cover how to protect your energy. And fourth, the bigger question, is this worth fighting for? Or is it the sign that you've been waiting for that it's finally time to move on? If you're new here, my name's Lucy and I'm so glad you found my channel. I use my 30 years of workplace experience to try to help people be happy in work and happy in life. I record videos every Wednesday, and if you're not subscribed already, you know what I'm going to say next. So let's get cracking. Before we get into the strategies to tackle them, I want to make sure that we're naming things correctly. Because if you've been feeling like this, there's a very good chance that you've been blaming yourself. You've probably been telling yourself you're not adapting fast enough, that maybe you're resistant to change, that maybe you're the problem. Let me let you into a little secret. You're not. Here's what's actually happening. Many organisations, particularly those which have grown very rapidly or shifted heavily towards younger leadership structures, have unconsciously built cultures which confuse pace with intelligence. They reward novelty over depth. If you've watched some of my other videos, you might have heard me talk about how startup energy can lean towards toxic. Organisations like this have often stopped creating the conditions where experience can speak and be listened to. And this isn't about your boss being a bad person, it's often unintentional, but the effect on you is the same. Your experience, all the decisions you've made, the disasters you've prevented, the institutional history that you've built up over decades becomes an invisible asset. Everyone benefits from it, but nobody talks about it or names it. And when budgets are cut and decisions are get made, it's the last thing that gets counted. That's the Gen X trap, and you cannot escape a trap that you haven't even seen as a trap. And I want to name something specific here because the data is clear and it deserves saying out loud. If you're a woman in this situation or from a minoritized background, the effect on you is even greater. The experience of being made to feel invisible is not only more common, it's more intense, it's more sustained, and it's harder to name because it comes wrapped in layers that often aren't acknowledged. The research shows that women and people of colour in senior roles face a compounded version of this. Ageism, gender bias, and racism all operating simultaneously and often in the shadows. Their invisible asset becomes even more invisible. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I recognise what Lucy's describing, but for me it's even worse, then do let me know. Give me feedback in the comments, as I'd love to hear from you. So step one, and this matters, is simply this: stop blaming yourself for the situation that you find yourself in. What you're feeling is a perfectly rational response to being structurally undervalued. It's better to put a name on it so you can own it, and then we can work with it. Write this down if you need to. Your experience is not your problem. The system that can't see it is the problem. The second strategy is what you could call the energy audit. And I want you to actually do this, not just think about it. It's an activity that I often discuss with my coaching clients. Burnout at this stage of life has a very specific characteristic. It's not the kind of exhaustion that comes from overwork, although that is often present too. It's an exhaustion that comes from performing a competence that the people around you can't see. and don't seem to value in a room that's already decided you're irrelevant. And that is a completely different kind of drain, and it takes a completely different kind of recovery. So here's what I want you to do this week. Get a piece of paper or open the notes app in your phone and divide it into 2 columns. In one column on the left-hand side, write down every meeting, every interaction, every activity that went on in your working week that gives you positive energy, that makes you feel like yourself, that reminds you why you're good at this job. And on the other side, write down everything that depletes you. The meetings where you felt you had to justify your presence. The conversations where you edit yourself before you even open your mouth. The decisions that get made without you in the room. Now look at that second column. I'm willing to bet that most of it isn't about your workload. It's about recognition, or rather the absence of it. This audit matters because burnout recovery that doesn't address the source of the damage is just a sticking plaster. It's not going to fix the problem. You can rest more, sleep more, exercise more, take all the walks around the block that you want. But if you're going back into an environment that systematically erases your contribution, then you're going to keep on burning out. This audit tells you exactly what you're dealing with. It gives you data, and we're going to need that data for the next 2 strategies I'm going to share. Which side of your audit is longer right now? Because that answer matters more than you think. Strategy 3 is the most practical, and it's the one that people sometimes resist doing the most because it's the one that feels the most counterintuitive. It asks you to stop proving yourself and start narrating yourself, start telling your own story. Here's what I mean. When we've been doing something for a long time, we assume that all of our experience, everything we've done, everything we've achieved is self-evident and everybody knows. We know what our CV or our resume says, and we expect our track record to speak for itself. And in healthy organisations with good leadership, it does. But in cultures which have stopped being able to read depth, you have to translate for people. So instead of presenting a recommendation from a position of, I know this because I've done it, or even worse, from a position of, well, I'm Lucy and everybody knows what I've done, I don't need to tell them. Try framing it as something like this. In my experience, when we encountered problems like this, for example, blah, blah, blah project, here's what I've seen happen when organisations take this route. You're not being less expert. You're making your experience more audible to the people who need to hear it and be reminded of it. And practically speaking, this means 3 things. First, you're anchoring your recommendations to the outcome, not the process. Not, I've been doing this for 30 years, but last time I saw somebody do this, this is what it cost us. Being more specific in this way makes what you're saying more credible. Second, start asking questions in meetings instead of leading with answers. I know this feels backwards, but in cultures which value participation over authority, the person who asks the sharpest, most pointed question often has more influence than the person with the best answer. Third, find your allies. There'll be people in the organisation who do see you, who do understand what you bring. Invest in those relationships because influence travels through trust. And trust travels through relationships, not necessarily the ones joined by lines on organisation charts. And if you've done all that and you're still feeling unheard, then we do need to have a different conversation, which is exactly what my final strategy is about. I want to pause here for a moment because I don't think I can talk about this honestly without telling you something personal. In some of the roles that I've done before branching out on my own, I've experienced exactly these dynamics. I've got decades of experience leading big teams, managing difficult conversations and transitions. But over the years, as I got older, I started to notice a shift. It was subtle at first. The way my contributions were received in certain rooms, the sense that the institutional memory that I carried, the context, the relationships, the hard-won knowledge of what worked and what hadn't worked was starting to feel a bit like dead weight rather than ballast in the useful sense. I remember sitting in a meeting and realising that I was translating myself in real time, editing, adjusting, managing how I was landing, when I had spent 30 years earning the right to say what I wanted. And I realised it was costing me, and that's been part of my decision to move on. I'm not telling you to leave. I'm just telling you what it was like for me. But I am telling you that that feeling that you're having, the one where you're doing all of the right things, but it's still not enough, that feeling is data. And I say this in my videos all the time. Data deserves to be taken seriously. Which brings us to strategy 4. Strategy 4 is one I've talked about at length before in the context of workplace bullying. And if you've seen that video, this will feel familiar, but it still matters. It's really important. Start documenting. Not obsessively, not defensively, but consistently and with intention to build up your evidence base. Bullies hate paper trails, and so do organisations that have started to sideline their most experienced people. The moment that you begin to create a written record of your contributions, your decisions, the outcomes they produced, two things happen. One, you have evidence, and if this situation ever needs to be formally addressed, that will stand you in good stead. You'll have something concrete to work with. Two, and this is the one people underestimate, the very art of documenting changes how you carry yourself. When you know your record is accurate and retrievable, you stop shrinking yourself. You stop second guessing your own memory of what happened. And you stop allowing a narrative to build around you that you haven't written. In practice, this is simple. Keep a running note, weekly, not daily, of what you contributed, what decisions you were involved in, and what the outcomes were. Copy yourself into key email threads. After significant meetings, send a brief follow-up. Just confirming what we agreed. Takes 5 minutes, worth its weight in gold. Your experience is an asset. Start treating it like one. Assets have records. If you haven't seen my video on dealing with a workplace bully, I'll link it above because the tools overlap more than you'd expect. And so we come to strategy 5, the one that I think that if you've been watching this video from the beginning, you probably knew was coming. Stay, adapt, or go. This isn't a script I can write for you, but I can give you the framework that I use with my coaching clients, and I've used it myself. 3 questions. First, is the problem systemic or situational? Systemic means it's baked into the culture, into the leadership, into the way of doing business, the way we do things around here, how decisions are made, what gets rewarded. Situational means it's one manager, one team, one situation which could change. Systemic problems rarely self-resolve. Situational ones sometimes do. Second, have you said the true thing out loud? Not hinted at it, not hoped it would be noticed. Have you actually named clearly, directly, professionally what you think is going on? That you feel your experience isn't being valued and asked for a conversation about that. Because if the answer is no to that question, then you don't yet have the full information required to make a decision about whether this situation is fixable or not. Third, what is staying costing you? Not in salary or status, but in health, in your confidence, in your sense of who you are. Because I've watched people stay in roles for years beyond the point where the cost was sustainable. And the version of themselves that they brought home at the end of those years was not the version that they wanted to be. I'm not here to tell you to leave. Leaving isn't always the right answer. But staying without a plan, waiting for something to change by itself, hoping that eventually your experience will be seen, that isn't a strategy. Don't quit tomorrow, but don't linger on thinking things are going to fix themselves either. Your career is too valuable to sacrifice to somebody else's workplace dysfunction. If this video has been helpful to you, if you've recognised yourself in any part of what I've been talking about, then I want you to know something. You're not behind, you're not broken, you are not too much, and you are definitely not too old. You are someone with something genuinely valuable to offer. And the question isn't whether that's true, because it is. The question is whether the place where you're working is genuinely capable of receiving it. The mantra of this channel is work should lift us up, it shouldn't be wearing us down. And if your work is wearing you down, then something needs to change. And I hope today's video gave you something to work with. If you found it helpful, please do share it with someone else who might need to see it too. I think there are a lot of Gen X professionals, midlife professionals like us, who are feeling exactly the same way. And they might find a video that a friend sends to them really helpful. If you're not already subscribed and you'd like to see more of what I do click that button and you'll see my weekly Wednesday uploads. If you'd like to hear more from me and you're not subscribed to my weekly newsletter, then that's something else that is free and goes out every Friday. And I also offer one-to-one coaching, and I'll pop the link below in the description if you'd like to find out more about that. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.